Shalom, Israel. Shalom. 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 Greetings. This is the third Charles D. Thank you for taking time out to watch a video. There's thousands and thousands of videos out there, and thousands of interpretations and ideas and ways of thinking. And I hope that what I have to say today helps you. That's my goal. That is truly my only priority, to help people live a better life in relationship to the Most High. Because it's about spending eternity with Him. You do not want to hear, "Depart from me, I never knew you." You don't want to hear that. What you want to hear is, "Good job. Good job, my faithful servant." That's what you want to hear. That's what I want to hear. So if we want to hear those things, then we got to find out, how should we be living our lives down here? What parameters, what instructions has the Father given us? Not man, not your pastor, not your church. There's all kinds of things out there. But what has the Most High said? How has He said we're supposed to live? So we'll start in Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. Sorry. Matthew chapter 22. Excuse me, chapter 22. And we're going to look at what the Messiah said. So He was asked the questions. You know that the Pharisees and Sadducees, or the religious people of His day, who thought they knew the law so well, these were the people that, your religious people. These weren't just ordinary people living on the streets or hanging out or doing their own thing. They believed they knew these scriptures backward and forward, inside and out, could tell you what you're supposed to do. And so they were constantly trying to trap Him and ask Him questions to get Him, to accuse Him of going off or preaching something different. So you can find many examples of them doing this. Well, here's just another example. So what they did was they asked Him, "What's the greatest commandment?" So He had actually, you could start in verse 34, and He had put the Sadducees to silence, it says. What that means is He had shut them up. They were trying to ask Him some questions. He shut them up with His wisdom and his responses. So now the Pharisees came, and they said, "Okay, what's the greatest commandment?" So we'll pick it up in verse 37. And excuse me, I'm just going to read the scriptures the way they're written out of my King James Bible. This is not 1611, but it is just the King James. I realize that some people don't use the name Jesus. I don't either, really. But I don't know who's watching this video and what your understanding is. We know that was not His name. He was from Judea in a time where the letter J wasn't even around or existed. So most of the time I just say Messiah. That's who I'm referring to as the Messiah, because I don't know what name you might go by, and I definitely don't want people to be turned off if I use a name that they don't use or they don't like. So whatever name you use, whatever, we're talking about the Messiah here. Now, I know His name is not Jesus, I'll say that, but I'm going to read the words as they're written, because from the person coming in that woke up this morning, literally and spiritually, they don't know. So if you've been in this thing 5, 10, 15, 20 years and then that's fine. You have understanding, and don't punish the person that don't know for that. So I'm just going to read it as it is. All right. Verse 37. Here's His response. Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So they said, "What's the greatest commandment?" He said, "Love the Lord thy God and love your neighbor as yourself." So then for me, the way my brain works is, okay, how do I do that? Or what does that look like? Because, and I'll show you. Let's go. 1 John 3:18. 1 John 3:18. Let's look at something John said about this. He said, "My little children," this is 1 John 3, verse 18. "My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue," meaning let us not say we just love people. And word, what the words we use in tongue, from any language. You know, you might know several languages, and it might sound nice to say "I love you" in another language. Maybe you speak 2 or 3 different languages. I don't, but maybe you do. But neither in tongue nor in word. So it ain't about just saying it, which is very popular. And has been for some time now. "I love you, I love you." And we think that because if we say it enough, then people start to believe it, no matter how you act towards them, or no matter what you say behind their back, or that you see them in need and you act like you don't see the need. No matter how you treat people, it's just a popular thing to just say "I love you," and that's good enough. Well, here it says that's not good enough. "Let us not love in word, neither in tongue," but how? "But in deed," in what we do. That's what deed is. Deeds are what we do. "And in truth." So what we do really matters. And what is the truth? Well, we know Messiah said he's the truth. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So he's the truth. And that's a popular one. So everybody knows, whether you're Christian church or, especially in the Christian church, which is what I came out of. So, most of my, when I refer to something, that's where I'm coming from, because that's where I came from. That's what I know. I'm not going to speak on, where Muslims come from, because I wasn't Muslim. I don't know that. I'm going to speak from where I came from. So that's the understanding I know. And I know a lot of people in the Christian church. That's a popular one. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," is what Messiah said. So we know that he is the truth. But let me show you another thing. Let me show you another scripture that talks about truth and what is the truth. Why don't you go to Psalm 119? Psalm 119. So this is the longest chapter in the Bible, Psalm 119. And I encourage you, if you ever get a chance to if you ever want to just sit down and read, you don't know what to read Psalm 119. It's the longest chapter in the Bible. And pay attention to the words that are being used. You might be surprised. But for now, we're going to look at verse 142 to start. Verse 142. It says, "Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth." So what is the law? Well, wouldn't that be what we call the first 5 books of the Bible, the law of Moses, or the books of Moses, the Torah, the law? This says, "Thy law is the truth." Better yet, though, if you skip down to verse 151, it says it again, but look at how the words change a little bit. "Thou art near, O Lord, and all thy commandments are truth." So for anybody who says the law is done away with, or we don't have to keep commandments, or the only 2 commandments we have to keep is what the Messiah said in Matthew 22, well, this says that all of them are truth. All of them. Now, whether we can keep them or not because of a temple being there or not, because we're in the land or not, now that's a difference, that's something else. But that doesn't change the fact that all the laws are truth, though. Because at one point when we were a nation and had our own land, we kept all these commandments. We did. So to say that we don't have to keep them no more is not a very wise or understanding statement. Because if the Messiah is the truth, and this is saying that the law is the truth, and we know according to John chapter 1 and verse 1, or 1 verse 4, or really the first 15 verses, what it talks about, first 14 verses, what it talks about is that the Word was made flesh. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. So really, the Messiah and his word they're one and the same. So to say the law is done away with is like saying Messiah is done away with, and ain't nobody saying that. Not anybody that believes Messiah. I mean, if you don't believe Messiah and you're watching this video, you might as well turn it off, because I'm not going there. So we have to figure out, how should we be living, or what should we be doing? How should our lives look if we say we love one another? Well, first, let's get this understanding according to Scripture. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12, and let's just make sure we're on the same page about from the start. How about that? We'll say from the start. Now, obviously, this is not exhaustive. I'm trying to make this video as short as possible, so you can look at it in 15-20 minutes and get some understanding, hopefully be inspired, and begin to implement this into your life. So I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, but I'm not going to rush either. So if it ends up being 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes, whatever. Matthew chapter 12, verse 33 says, either make the tree good and his fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and his fruit. For the tree is known by his fruit. So what he's saying here, and this is Messiah speaking, what he's saying here is, you want to know what kind of tree you're looking at? All you got to do is look at the fruit. That's all you have to do. You want to know what kind of tree you're looking at? Look at the fruit, and that'll tell you what kind of tree you're looking at. Now, you might be a tree lover or a tree expert and be able to tell a certain kind of tree by the bark, or where it grows and those kind of things, but everybody don't have those skills or that understanding. So very simply put, you want to find out what kind of tree you're looking at? All you got to do is look at the fruit. So let's go to Matthew 7. Let's go back a couple chapters in Matthew 7. And this was when Messiah is giving some directions. And now he's speaking about false prophets, or people that are, they're false. It says it right there, doesn't it? Verse 15. Let's look at what he says. He says, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. So these false prophets, they come to you looking one way on the outside, but on the inside, they are another way. So on the outside, they look like you, sheep's clothing. They look like you. They might speak the same language. They might do some of the same things and lift their hands and worship. And they might do some of the same things that you do, trying to look like you. But on the inside, where we truly begin, once the inside starts to come out, that's when we find out who we really are. That's who we really are. They are ravening wolves, it says. Verse 16, ye shall know them by their fruits. You shall know these false prophets by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Meaning, can you get basically something from nothing is what the question is. Grapes from thorns? Thorns don't produce grapes. Figs from thistles? Thistles don't produce figs. So can you get something from nothing? So it's a rhetorical question that the answer is obviously no. He says, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, verse 20, by their fruits ye shall know them. So he's saying, if you're a good tree, you cannot bring forth bad fruit. If you're a good tree. And if you're a corrupt tree, you cannot bring forth good fruit. So you're going to be one or the other. Now, obviously, we're talking about false prophets here. There's going to be some deception involved. So that means you can't just simply take a glance at somebody and think, oh, okay, I see they're good fruit. They're good peoples. We're on the same level. Nope. That means, you might not see, I mean, when you plant a fruit tree, you don't see fruit instantly. That takes time, takes nurturing. You gotta tend to that tree for one. I'm not saying we're supposed to tend to every person that we come across, but I'm saying you better, be careful about who you do deal with. And if you're unsure, then take some time before you really let them in and find out what kind of fruit their life has. Are you dealing with a wolf or are you dealing with a real sheep? Because a wolf's going to just use you up and try to get from you as much as they can and leave you raggedy and torn and tattered and, maybe even killed, maybe even dead. I mean, spiritually speaking, I'm speaking spiritually here, not literally. But you got to be careful about who you deal with. And I know that's hard for us to hear because we live in a society that says, don't judge anybody. And, what does it matter? And let everybody in. And, just people are people and it's all the human race and these kinds of things that have been, weapons used against us to cloud our mind from real righteous judgment. So I'm going to tell you right now, I get it. Messiah said, judge not lest you be judged. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to call wickedness, wickedness, and righteousness, righteousness. I'm not afraid of that. So if you want to accuse me of being judgmental, I'm going to tell you, yep, I am judgmental. Because he's telling me that I better first of all recognize what kind of tree I am. And if I'm corrupt, then I better get it right. I got time to get it right because in verse 19, he says, every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit, if I ain't bringing forth good fruit, what's the consequence for that? You're hewn down or you're cut down and you're cast into the fire. And I ain't trying to go to the fire. So I'm going to take my chances judging righteousness and wickedness to the best of my ability against these scriptures so that for one, I can see if I'm righteous or wicked, if the fruit that I'm producing is good or bad fruit. But then more than that, the people that I deal with around me, are they producing good or corrupt fruit? And then do I need to create some space or can I embrace them? And you should ask yourself the same question and not be afraid, because what your enemy has done, your spiritual enemy, what he has done is he's gotten us afraid to think like this, to guard our hearts, to guard our minds from placing judgment on things that people do or how they live so as to be more comfortable around them. I'm not going to be comfortable around wickedness. I'm not going to be comfortable around it. So by their fruits, you shall know them. So we have to ask ourselves, well, then how do we know we love God? Or how do we know we love our neighbor? What are the fruits that our lives should be showing to find out, do we actually love God? Or do we love our neighbor? Well, so first we'll go to 1 John chapter 5. Let's go back to 1 John chapter 5. And again, I know I talked about Psalm 119, but I tell you what, 1 John, it's a really good book to read. He makes some things really plain and really clear. Once you start to get some understanding of the so-called Old Testament or the scriptures, really, the Torah, the law. 1 John chapter 5. Look at verse 3. It says, for this is the love of God. For this is the love of God. So how do I know if I love God? Well, what it says next, well, that's the love. This is how I know this is how he knows that I love him. Or this is how you can tell if I love him. That we keep his commandments. That we keep his commandments. And his commandments are not grievous, meaning they're not heavy on us. It's not a hard burden. That's what we've been taught. That's how we've been lied to. So they say, no, nobody can keep all these commandments. They're so hard. And so that's why Jesus came and died, so that we don't have to keep these commandments no more. Now all we got to do is these two. But I'm saying to you, okay, first of all, if it's just these two, why is it not more specific? How else can you show God you love him? By just saying it? Because if you go back to Matthew chapter 7, he's going to tell you, many people are going to say, Lord, Lord, I did all these things in your name. They're going to be saying, Lord, I love you. And he's going to say, I never knew you. I don't know who you are. Depart from me. So, and again, 1 John chapter 3, it's not in word or in tongue. It's not about saying I love you. Many people just they think if they say I love God 1,000 times a day, I'm not saying this is not their conscious thought, but inside those kind of how they feel. If they just or kind of how they think. If I just say it enough, then that's what makes it true. But that ain't the case. It's not about what you say. It's about what you do. It is. Well, we can't, Jesus came, his blood is what saves us. We're not saved by our works. Well, yes, the scriptures say that. Yes, the word says that. We ain't saved by our own works, but that doesn't negate us from having to do good works. This is the mistake many people make is they have been duped into believing that because Christ came, shed his blood for the remission of our sins, that now we can just live any old kind of way. You don't have any understanding of what sin is according to the Bible. That's 1 John chapter 3 and 4. You don't have any understanding about who he even came for. He said, I only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I mean, what we have to do is we have to get rid of the lies that have been told us. And we have to challenge all those things that have been told us by our oppressors, by our captors. And we have to look at these scriptures for what they actually say in totality, in total, what they really say, what they are really teaching. Because right here it's saying, if you love God, you'll keep his commandments. If you love him, you'll keep his commandments. This is in the so-called New Testament. This ain't in the Old Testament. Now it says it there too, but this is in the New. So they're confirming, or they're saying the exact same thing that they've seen in the scriptures, because remember, the disciples and the people that lived in this time, they didn't have a New Testament to go by. All they had was the scriptures, the law and the prophets. That's all they had. So if they said something that was contrary to the law or to the prophets, that would have been heresy. They accused the Messiah of that because they had no understanding. They didn't know what he was talking about. And so they thought he was talking against the law or against the prophets, even though he said, I didn't come to change a thing, not a jot or a tittle of that. I didn't come to change any of that. I came to fulfill what it says in there. But they didn't understand. So they accused them of heresy. And it's the same thing you're saying about John, about Paul, about Peter. If you think they are saying something contradictory to the scriptures, the so-called Old Testament, then you're accusing them of heresy. And they didn't do that. If you believe they did that, this word ain't truth, then you should just close the book and do something else then. What's the point? It's got to be all truth, or it's error, it's lies, and then what are you doing dealing with it? So I believe the whole thing is true. Yes, there's been some corruptions and some additions and some subtractions, and those people are going to get dealt with for those things. But that does not excuse us from doing our due diligence to better understand these scriptures to the best of our ability, according to who the Most High is, according to who we are, according to who the Messiah is. Those things matter. Keeping commandments matter. They're not going to get you into the kingdom, but they are part of. And you can find that in Revelation 14. You can find that in Revelation 22. So at the end of the book, where we ain't even at to yet in human history, and they were still talking about keeping commandments, that should tell you something. That should tell you something. If it's at the end of the book and we ain't even to that place in human history yet, and it's still talking about keeping commandments, that should tell you something. So, 1 John 5 and 3, that's how we show the Father we love him, that we keep his commandments. Commandments like don't eat pork. What's so hard about that? Don't eat shrimp, crab, and lobster. What's so hard about that? He said, Leviticus chapter 11, he said, here are the parameters of the things you can eat, of the cattle, of the things that come out of the water, of the fowl. And if an specific animal was not named, he's given us parameters so we can find out, does that animal fit inside these parameters or not? Can I eat it or not? It's very simple. And at the end of the day, if you still can't figure it out and you ask the Father and he gives it to you in your spirit, go ahead, eat it, then eat it. If it's not specifically named, but specifically named, he said, don't eat swine. Don't even touch its dead carcass. Don't even touch it. But people think, oh, well, as long as I pray over it, then we're good. He said, don't, if it comes out of the water, it must have fins and scales. Shrimp don't have fins and scales. Lobster don't have fins and scales. Crab don't have fins and scales. These things don't have fins and scales. So, now we have the information and the understanding to know that these are all bottom dwellers. They're garbage disposals for the sea, basically. And then you want to pick that up and put that in your mouth. And I used to love shrimp. I'm not telling you something I had to deal with myself. I used to love shrimp. I mean, lobster was okay, but I thought it was a little bland. That's why you got to eat with a lot of butter. And crab legs were just a whole lot of work for a little bit of meat. But shrimp, though, shrimp was delicious. I ain't gonna lie about it. Shrimp was delicious. But when I see that, it makes it easier for me to go, oh, he said don't touch it. I'm good. Because you know why? His commandments are not grievous. For those that truly want to live for him, for those that truly want to show him that they love him, then it's not grievous. It's not hard. And even if it's hard in the beginning, even if you're saying to yourself, I'm making no sacrifice because I really want to eat that, but Father, I love you more than I love this particular food that I really want to eat that you said don't eat. It becomes not grievous. It actually gets easier. I stopped eating pork when I was 17 years old for no religious reason at all. Not that this is a religion, it's a way of life, but for no reason at all except for I got the understanding that it's just not good for you. It takes forever for your body to break down pork. And in some cases, it can even start rotting in your belly before it's even broken down. That's how hard it can be on your system. And so I got that understanding. I was like, I'm done. I'm not eating pork. And that was before I even knew who I was and who I knew who the Most High was. And none of that spiritual stuff was helping me, to my knowledge anyway, I'll say. And it still made it easier once I made up my mind, like, nah, I'm not dealing with that because it's not good for me. And you have to understand, you serve a loving Father. He is our Father. Why would our Father not want what's best for us? Of course he does. So he's going to tell us, don't eat this stuff. It's not good for you. You can't eat this stuff. You're not made to put this stuff in your body. What's so grievous about that? What is so grievous about saying, okay, Father, I trust you. I trust you enough to know that you know what's good for me because you made it. So you know what's good for me, and I'm just going to leave that alone. He told us what day to rest on, and he never changed it. What's so grievous about resting on the day he told us to rest? You know what's hard about that? If you want to go out and do shopping, because everybody does shopping on Saturday. That's when everybody goes shopping. That's when the stores want to make all their money. But he told us to rest on that day. He said, get a rest. You work hard all week. Rest on that day. On the seventh day, same as he rested. If you really love the Most High, you show him by doing these things, by keeping the commandments he told you to keep. You can talk about the 10. You can talk about the so-called 613. And yes, I said so-called because I'm going through them right now and I'm finding out there's a lot of duplicates. So it ain't 613, but if that's what you want to do, then I advise you look into it then. Study to show yourself approved. Look into it. And then you tell me. Because I'm going to tell you right now, even inside the first 10, there's one duplicate. There's 2 duplicates, in my opinion. But that's me. I'm getting off the topic. I'm sorry. Love God. Keep his commandments. So remember what you do as equated to your fruit. What fruit is your life showing? What kind of fruit is your life showing? That's going to prove if you love God or if you love your neighbor. Right? So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. So like I said, I was in the Christian church for many, many years. Many years. I grew up in the Christian church, spent some time out in the street in my teen years. And then eventually, quote unquote, gave my life to Christ when I was like 19 or something and was for real about it. It wasn't, I didn't go back and forth, and just, I got scared and went to the church. And then once that fear went away, I went back in the street and back and forth, back and forth. That's not my story. And if that's your story, that's your story. I'm not saying I'm any better than you or any worse than you, nothing like that. I'm just telling you my story. My story was when I turned 19 and gave my life to Christ, I was for real about it. Like I really wanted to change my life from what I was doing to something different. So I began to read and study as much as I could. even though I still had the Christian mindset. So obviously there were some things that were off. Eventually got to the place where, I was able to, be a youth pastor, a leader, a pastor, and, all kinds of stuff. But, and through all those years and through all that time, one of the pet peeves that I have is in 1 Corinthians 13, which is dubbed, quote unquote, the love chapter. I only heard about it at weddings. And it drove me crazy, because I'm just like, why do we think this only pertains to weddings? It makes no sense to me. Like, it makes no sense. I can't even remember or recall any preacher, even including myself, ever preaching on this outside of weddings. And I would actually, most times I would avoid this unless they specifically asked for it. Because I'm just like, to me, it became kind of cliche. Like, this is what people always talk about. And this is not it's not how I'm built. I like to kind of buck trends and that kind of thing. But anyway, well, here I am talking about it, and it's not a wedding. Because now my understanding is, if I love God and if I love my neighbor as myself, then I should have some fruit that indicates that. So then my question is, what kind of fruit does love have? What kind of fruit do we see if someone says they love you? What kind of fruit should I see from their life coming towards me that proves they love me? So here we are in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We'll start at verse 4. Now, in the King James, it says charity, but it is translated. It could be translated love. Okay, so you understand. Charity suffereth long. So that's where you hear that. I mean, in most, weddings, they'll say, love is patient. Charity suffereth long. It means I'm patient with you. I understand it might take you a while to either get where I'm at or to understand what I'm saying, to get over a certain habit if you're trying to break one, to create a certain habit if you're trying to make one, but I'm patient with you. I mean, from all these characteristics, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, has the Father been this way towards me? Because he says he loves us, right? When we were still sinners, Christ died for us. In this, that we know that God loves us, and while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. The most popular one, for God so loved the world, Israel, that he sent his son to die for us. So did he show us these things? Well, charity suffereth long. Has he been long suffering with us? That's rhetorical, because we know the answer. Of course he has. He could have destroyed us a long time ago for our sin, but he didn't do that. All right. And is kind. Yes, the Father's kind. Because I'm going to tell you this. Even in Christianity, there were some definite times the Most High answered some prayers and provided for me and was looking out for me. And I was in sin, worshiping on the wrong day, didn't know who I was, not keeping, knowingly keeping any commandments, although inherently or, subconsciously or just inside of me, there was actually a lot of commandments I was keeping. And the same goes for a lot of you Christians. If any Christians are listening to this and you're saying we don't have to keep commandments, I'm going to tell you right now, you already keep a lot of them.